So now we're going to move to the first session, and it's my pleasure to introduce our first two speakers. So we will first have Dr. Abramoff, and just quick background, I shared a little bit about him. Unfortunately, he was not able to join us today. There's going to be some big, interesting announcement. I can't wait to hear all about it, given he is the groundbreaking physician innovator who brought us the first de novo authorized autonomous AI system. But he is going to have a special message for us, and there's going to be a very cool format we put together with our other very illustrious speaker, Jordan Berg, who's the principal investigator of the National Telehealth Technology and Assessment Center. He has over 16 years of leadership in health IT evaluation and adoption. And he is going to share not only a practical perspective on AI readiness and adoption, but really he's going to help us think through the fundamental framework of how you should think about AI, since it's not one thing, and how you can do the essential questions so that at the end of the day, when you're using these tools, you will probably be one of the most, if not the most informed person in your organization, how to think about these issues. And you can take these frameworks and these questions to your colleagues and your leadership to make sure that others are as informed and ready as you. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jordan.
Okay, thanks everybody. For people in the room, you guys have been watching me scramble around for the last 20 minutes. So, and then for people online, I've been scrambling around in the room for the last 20 minutes, but we are here to talk to you about artificial intelligence and kind of how it impacts for you. So I am the bread in the first section sandwich we have for you. Dr. Abramoff has a really wonderful recording for you. And my job here is to help. He's providing a very specific use case. And what I want to do is take his specific use case and generalize it and help us break down and really use it as a learning experience for how do we think about AI? How do we break this down? Now, what we're going to see, I have no conflicts of interest. I really wish I'd bought in a lot of AI stock, but I didn't, and that's not just where we're at. So what we want to do is you may see some visual and some things that I'm saying that are similar to maybe some of the sessions that you had in the earlier AI bootcamp. I want to draw that through line for you guys so that you guys can know the stuff that you saw in the virtual sessions is the same things that we're covering today. It's how are we thinking about these tools. We want to look at a real world AI system, look at how it was implemented, and then in the specific case, we're looking at an autonomous diabetic retinopathy screening tool. We want to be able to apply the AI framework that we've talked with you about several times in all the online sessions. And then we want to provide you with some practical takeaways that you can take back to your organizations, back to your communities, and be able to start breaking down what are these AI systems and how do we actually make them work for us. A couple key things to remember from previous sessions. AI is transformative. It's changing the way that we do business. I think this is becoming kind of a moot point. I think people recognize AI is here. It's impactful. It can potentially be helpful. It can also potentially be harmful. And we need to make sure that we're looking at it. The other thing I want to just underline is it's not one thing. We talk about AI and we could be talking about a variety of different solutions, a variety of different systems, ranging from visually based diabetic retinopathy screening, which is what we're going to see, to chat models, to creating translation services. We're facing workforce shortages, and I think that's probably the critical thing that we're all looking at is how do we do so much more with so much less? We are facing more and more increased demands for technicality and for capacity in the care that we are delivering. And then we are facing a chronic disease epidemic that's really infecting every level of our society, but particularly those that are rural and underserved. So I want to run through this framework. And this is one of the things I want you to keep in mind as you're listening to Dr. Abramoff speak, is this is the structure that we're choosing to use. And I'll do this very, very quickly, but systems are the underpinning technology, the AI technology. That might be optical character recognition, that might be generative AI. There's a variety of different systems that are there. Methods are the way that we are approaching or using, no, sorry, and I've already messed up. Bear with me. Systems are the overall tool. So it's the thing that you build. Methods are the underlying AI technology that we're using to empower our systems. Functionalities are the things that we need those systems to do. The level of autonomy is the way that we interact with the AI. Is this a helper? Is this someone that we give a job and it goes out and does the job? Or is this something that we use to like check just to make sure that we're doing it, doing the things that we want? So we can refer to those in 3 different levels: assistive, augmentative, or autonomous. And then we also want to consider what is the nature of the space that we're deploying these things into. Conditions of employment. We want to look from the very beginning at the entry points of bias throughout the life cycle, and we want to consider the applications that these solutions have in healthcare. So in this session, what I really want to draw our attention to is this is some of the things that we're going to be hearing. We're going to get a practical, sorry, and I need to churn a little bit so I could see. Oh, we need a practical example of AI from the point of that it was innovated to the point that it was actually delivering care. That sort of arc is really hard to find in these stories. So this is a really unique, interesting thing. So we want to pay attention to that. We also want to listen to Dr. Abramoff describe what AI really does well. What are the things that it's excellent at doing versus maybe a human? We want to see the how real-world impacts of bias and regulation and reimbursement impact our ability to actually deploy this, to generate buy-in, to get people on board with the solutions. And we really want to look at how he focuses on the patient outcomes and what the organizational realities are for these solutions. We're going to listen for the AI job being done. We're going to watch as he traces the path through method, system, and deployment. We're going to look at the implications of full autonomy. We're going to consider how bias and ethics are measured and managed at every step of development. And we're going to look at how we have to build the ecosystem for AI to actually thrive in our solutions. Okay, and with that, I'm going to stop talking and we're going to listen to Dr. Abramoff.
My name is Michael Abramoff, and I'm very excited to be talking to you about leveling up AI awareness and anticipation. Like I said, my name is Michael Abramoff. I am both a professor of ophthalmology at the University of Iowa and also founder of a company, an AI company called Digital Diagnostics. I have some other roles, but they're not relevant right now. Obviously, I have some conflicts of interest. They're listed here. I won't go into detail because you can read it. And so part of this is a little bit of a personal journey to explain why we are where we are really in AI. So this is me at a little bit younger age, talking about neural networks and machine learning and maybe how we can use that in healthcare. So very, naive physician scientist. Here's me as a resident, and I did some work on machine learning for, in this case, a complication of diabetes called diabetic retinopathy, which, by the way, happens to be the most important cause of blindness among Americans. So it's also relevant to be able to prevent it and diagnose it earlier. But again, it was at the time primarily, can we actually do this with a computer, and what is the science behind it? Did a ton of work, got some patents. I think there's 28 now. By now, this is a little bit of an older slide. Many scientific papers, and still none of this had benefited any patients. And that is really the challenge where we are right now. You hear a lot about AI. Most of it, if you look into it in detail, most of it is academic, or it's hype and has not been really proven in a healthcare setting. And so you really need to think about how we can get from really the science and the engineering on the left to clinic where you may be practicing medicine and trying to improve patient outcomes on the right. I think that's the key, what we'll be talking about. And if you're a little bit familiar with how drugs are typically created, that's an industry called pharma. And there's a well-known path, well-trodden path, I have to say, where if you do an invention like this light bulb on the left, it's an old-fashioned light bulb, obviously, I'm old, so I can use that. But let's say you do an invention and you think of some protein that can make blind children see. There's a path where typically if you're in an academic environment, it will be patented, and then a pharmaceutical company can come in and take it through various stages of validation, meaning does it work maybe in animals, does it work in human models, and then clinical trials, and ultimately there's a path to getting this to patients and for the pharma company making a lot of money. For AI, none of that today and in the past exists. So there's no big AI company that will take, let's say that you have this cool invention with a cool AI that actually works, and take it all the way to patients. So that had to be, created, that path. And I'm afraid it's a little bit complex. So here's what I had to get through. It's cool to be the first to do something like this. It's also lots of hurdles and challenges to do something like this. And so I'm pretty open about what needs to happen. So all the way on the left, you see here a multi-layer neural network, an AI, a diagnostic AI algorithm. And like I said, the science, the validation had really been done. But it doesn't mean that it would get all the way on the right to patients where it benefits patients and actually improves their outcomes. It required creating ethics for AI, which was new. It meant working very closely with FDA on AI regulation, and it continues to this day. I'm deeply involved in that. But again, if you have your invention, there's a path. You don't need to do all of these, but you will need to be aware of all of these steps. Big thing is liability. If you, in medicine and healthcare, who's liable if something goes wrong? If the patient dies or goes blind or has an undesirable outcome, who's actually liable? And we make errors, we continue to make errors as human providers, as AIs. That is never going to be perfect, it's never going to go away. So how do we deal with that? An important step was saying that at least for autonomous AIs, which is where the AI makes the clinical decision, and not every AI is like that. Some AIs just assist a clinician make a better decision, and then obviously the liability is the standard liability, medical malpractice suits, etc. But for autonomous AI, I said, and the American Medical Association agrees, that the liability for the performance of the AI should be with the company, with the creator of that AI, not the user. So if you're a health system, if you're a provider and use autonomous AI, you should not be held liable if that AI isn't working like it should. It should be the creator. And at least my company has been very clear about that. Another issue that needed to be addressed is the concern about racial and ethnic bias. So how do you discover where bias can occur, and that is more than just training? There's a lot more ways where you can introduce undesirable racial, ethnic, socioeconomic bias. And so how do you address that and make sure that it doesn't affect the results and also the outcomes of the patient? So together with FDA, we created a framework for addressing bias and mitigating it. And we were able to prove in the clinical trials that there was no significant racial, ethnic bias. Important for any provider is that they feel more comfortable using any device, any drug when it's part of the standard of care. And so it was a big moment when the American Diabetes Association decided to make autonomous AI for the diabetic eye exam part of the standard of care. That also allowed organizations in value-based care like National Committee of Quality Assurance to allow an autonomous AI to qualify for closing care gaps for HEDIS and MIPS, ultimately leading to reimbursement. And there was a whole ecosystem that had to be created to allow coverage and payment for an AI where there's no human involvement. How do you do that? What is the CPT code going to be like? What is the payment going to be like? All of that needed to be done. And again, all of this has to be done before it can benefit the first patient. None of this is, it helps getting it to patients. It's all necessary, but even when you do all of these things, it still hasn't benefited a single patient. So ultimately, that's what this is about. That's why, we do all this work, is to benefit patients. And what was exciting is doing clinical trials, doing randomized control trials to show better outcomes for patients. And that's really happening now, as well as, making sure it's being used and to benefit patients, because we now know it does from the results of these trials. So long path, but all of it is necessary. So what is this specific AI about, you may ask? And so it's an autonomous AI for the diabetic eye exam. And, just as an aside, it was the first ever. So that's why a lot of, the path that I showed cleared, it has been cleared, and we had to. So it's a fully autonomous AI. It makes the medical decision by itself, no human oversight, for diabetic retinopathy and diabetic macular edema, which are primary causes of blindness in the US overall, not only in people with diabetes. Proven to have no ratio genetic bias in that clinical trial I explained a little bit about. It's more accurate than any retina specialist. I was trained as a vitreoretinal surgeon myself, and it's way more accurate than me, but also any colleague. Medical liability, I mentioned, that lies with the creator, the company, not with the user. Very important should be. And we paid a lot of attention to making this work in a workflow in a primary care environment where no one has experience with this type of imaging. And so it's really important that even if you don't use it all day, every day, occasional use a few times per day, that you still get guided through it with a lot of, assistive AI around it to tell you what is a good image, what is a bad image, when do you need to retake it, what do you tell the patient. That's all been taken care of to make sure it's as easy as can in that primary care workflow. I mentioned that's key, and that it was also evaluated in. And then very important for any health system is that you can bill for it, you get paid, and it also closes MIPS and HEDIS care gaps. That was a lot of work on the policy side, but the important thing is it works for primary care and front lines of care environment. Next. Sorry. And so I mentioned evidence, and what is good about actually being in the real world out there is that you can do real world evidence studies, including randomized controlled trials with the existing layout and existing clinics that already adopted it. So there's a few shown here, but again, the key is that once you have that evidence, all the other parts of convincing stakeholders that this is the right thing to do becomes much easier. And one of the example is productivity and efficiency and physician satisfaction, where we showed, and this is in a low-income country, totally remote install, that indeed in a randomized controlled trial, meaning an AI arm and an arm where there was traditional care, it's 40% more efficient, and physicians are actually, happier, more pleased with their work. And we did it together with, as an aside, with the Flying Eye Hospital, or Orbis. And, this is really interesting organization where they help low-income countries get better care by having there's literally an OR on this plane, and they can then demonstrate, how to take better care of patients and train local physicians. I will skip through these other randomized controlled trials and other studies. And then you get, press releases like this where Stanford chief data scientist says that this is the best AI they're aware of. Again, that shows the stakeholder buy-in that is so crucial for getting this widely implemented to benefit patients. And as you can see here, in orange, that's this diabetic eye exam, the autonomous diabetic eye exam. There's one other AI, that's the blue one, that's even bigger for cardiac outflow, for managing people with heart disease. But these are really the only two AIs, one of them autonomous, that are out there that are actually really benefiting patients at scale. And it's not enough. I mean, we should be doing more of this, but it's at least getting there. And this goes back to, how do you get there from an algorithm or an ID that you may have to getting this to benefit patients? It's really crucial that you start with what benefits the patients most, what is beneficial for patient outcome, rather than say, wow, there's this cool ChatGPT. Let's find, how this can benefit patients. Now, I think in my view, you should always start with what is beneficial to patients, efficiency, quality of care, better outcomes, and then try to fit your technology into that rather than the obverse. And that's how you get round pegs into round holes, rather than having glamour AI, which is cool technologically and from a AI perspective, but not really helpful for patients. And part of that is, do not create this type of AI in a silo. If you're thinking about this, if you're doing it already, talk to other stakeholders, talk to patients, talk to providers, talk to payers. All of them have a say. All of them have their opinions and what should be done, and that avoids having pink glasses on and seeing unicorns and rainbows where they actually don't exist. And so, I love this slide because it really shows how to get this right and make sure it benefits the stakeholders. And here is a extensive list of the stakeholders, and they may sound a little bit like PP in the top right image, but if you don't take care of this, any of them can say stop, and then it doesn't really happen. Then you will have many years of delays, like happened with gene therapy, which was set back for 20 years because some groups did unethical experiments and young people died. I mean, and then people say stop, we don't want this, it's too scary. So we need to get it right, and we can get it right, and we have done it right. There's bad AI out there, but there's also a lot of good AI out there that is benefiting patients. Part of that is ethics, and I won't go into a lot of detail about this, but one of the messages is that you can have outside ethical experts looking in, and you see this in bigger tech companies, or you can give your developers, the people who are building the AI tools, the tools in hand to measure how much they meet ethical principles. And the whole backstory to that, it's written down in very scientific papers. Some of them I'm showing the references here, but you can really build regulation on an ethical framework that actually works for an engineer, for a developer, as well as reimbursement. And part of, a lot of the work was done on policy on how do you have an ethical framework for reimbursement? How do you get to, in this case, $55 per patient, where that has never been done before because no one knew how to pay for AI work where there's no human involved. How do you pay a computer? What is the worth of a computer? What is the worth of an AI like that? And we worked it out, and CMS supported that, and all the other organizations, physicians, patient organizations, standards of care all supported that. And so here we are. And then with all this work done, still less than 2% of all patients have now undergone, with diabetes, have now undergone this diabetic eye exam through AI that they all need. So, vast majority do not even have access to these exciting tools. So how do we get more of that? And that's really a matter, in my view, of policy. How do we get Congress to support, paying for this, making sure that they understand you have good AI and bad AI. We can measure the difference. So here's me doing congressional briefing only a few weeks ago where we talked about these exact things. Do we know how to get AI right and wrong? Yeah, we do. We can measure the difference. How do we pay for it? Can we pay for it in a way that actually saves money on the budget and doesn't, blow up the budget? Yes, we can. And what needs to happen? Well, there's all these very wonky recommendations that you can talk about, and I'm not going to do that. But the point is it can be done, and it's being done. So very exciting. And that, is why I want to finish on a very positive note. The future for AI in healthcare is, I think, looking very bright. You can take off those pink glasses now. These, rainbows are really out there. The unicorns are really out there. We just need to continue getting it right. Thank you very much. And I hope, this will be a very exciting day for all of us. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Right? See, this is the way I like to do presentations, is like I come in and talk for 2 minutes in the front, 2 minutes in the back, and somebody else does all the heavy lifting. But I do want to just underline a couple of the things that we heard. I hope we all had our assessment glasses on as we were kind of listening through this, looking for kind of keywords, what works, what doesn't work. And I think we're going to just pick this apart just a little bit, and then we'll kind of move us on to some questions, and then going on to the next step. So let's talk about breaking down the AI fundamentals framework for this particular use case. So the systems being used, right? What did we build? We built an autonomous digital AI diabetic retinopathy screening. What methods did we use? Well, we used computer vision, but above that, the one thing that is kind of almost goes under the radar was the assistive tools for actually capturing the images. And I think that's one of the key things here is like we're doing the diabetic retinopathy mapping, we're looking at it, we're comparing it to our model, we're identifying that disease state, but we're also building AI tools that are useful for capturing the images, which anybody who's done any diabetic retinopathy imaging will know it's very complex, very hard to do accurately. And using an assistive AI, we can make that process better, easier, quicker, and more functional. So functionalities are capturing the image with the technology, and then doing the retinal imaging interpretation and decision. Level of autonomy is autonomous, but again, we've already just described, it's also assistive. So we've got two levels of AI working here. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to learn more and more is that we probably won't be using a single AI. We'll be using various different AIs that are working together. You'll hear the term agentic, right? Like agents, AI agents that are coming together to provide a overall service. What were the conditions of deployment? One of the things that he really emphasized, and I thought this was very important, was the importance of primary care. Do we do a lot of diabetic retinopathy screening in primary care right now? Not as much as we can or should, and it requires specialized people to actually go in and do this. If we have a solution that's automated, we can do this at the primary care level. We can do this from a bus or from a plane and actually really get this out way more broadly without the need to have a bunch of staff that are trained to do this. Throughout the life cycle of the project, looking at the frameworks that they would need to use to address bias, to address reimbursement, and to make sure that we were actually going to be able to get this from the idea stage to the actual deployment stage. So this was the big scary slide he put up here. So I want to emphasize, this is not the expectation for most folks. You're not going to start from an idea, from a conceptual piece of technology. But the steps that were laid out here are really, really useful for us. So we're not going to start from like a university-created AI algorithm for most of us. We're going to look at vendors. We're going to look at services. We're going to look at things like that. But all of these other steps, making sure that we have an ethical foundation for how we work with these, that our vendors have ethical foundation, doing the asking the question of like, what is the liability? Who's responsible for that? All of these steps are going to be valuable for us, even if we're not creating these things from scratch. So what did this AI do? What did this AI solution do? It took a very complex imaging process and simplified it so that it could be deployed at scale. It created much more accuracy, so it was able to do these tests quickly and more accurately than humans. It provided a way to provide more access to these services at a lower level of care. And it provided a way to scale this across different organizations with a plan for ROI and how to pay for itself. So the broader lessons, and again, I get the advantage of watching something and I just get to pick out the things that I like. So this is easy. But the broader lessons that I see in this, but maybe you take some different broader lessons, but these are the ones I think we should focus on, is the focus has to be on outcomes and it has to be on patients. You know, I always love the quote, education's not an end in itself, or education must have an end in view because it's not an end in itself. And I feel that's the same for technology. If we start from the device, if we start from the technology, if we start from the, like, that looks cool, those are the things that end in drawers. Those are the things that don't get used. But if we start from the patient, if we start from the outcomes that we're looking for, those are technologies that will have a path forward in our systems. We have to have a firm understanding of the job that we're giving AI to do. So I liked this one. I had a ChatGPT spin this one up for me. We want our AIs having IKEA instructions, right? We want to understand the workflows and the things that we want it to do. We want to have it broken out. We want to have it step by step so that we understand when things go wrong, when we understand that things we're not getting the outcomes, or the inputs aren't matching the outputs. We want to engage with ethical and bias frameworks early and often. We want to make sure that we have regulatory clarity. What is going to be reimbursed? How is it going to be reimbursed? Who is liable? Who has the responsibility? We want to make sure that we can actually reimburse and be paid for the things that we're trying to do. And we want to make sure, and I think he emphasized this, but it could have been, I want to underline this, the stakeholder alignment. He had that big list of everyone that needed to kind of be at the table for these things to work. That applies at our clinical as well. You need your security folks, your IT security folks. You need your ethical, you need your ethical boards. You need everyone who's going to be touching this, purchasing and procurement, all the way down the pipeline, and the providers that are actually going to have to use this day to day. And that's where the focus on outcome and patients is actually going to make this palatable to your providers, because this could be a scary thing if we say like, hey, you know, we're looking to deploy solutions that can do your job better than you. That's not a winning conversation. But if the conversation is we can make improvements, we can make life better for our patients, that makes these technologies easier to grasp and more interest. And at that, I want to turn things over for questions. I think we had a couple questions in the room, and then I think we're going to go to online.
Yeah, I have a question. You know, I thought it was interesting that there was in the path of the journey, there was a section for liability. And I think having brought some AI options into the environment and having them denied by risk management, liability is a huge thing for us because we don't have faith in the AI. And if it makes a mistake, the provider or the clinic is liable for that misdiagnosis or something. Is there a movement, and I don't know, maybe there is by AMA and others, to shift that liability to the vendor to make this easier for us to implement?
I'm going to definitely punt on that, because there's a whole session that we're going to have a little bit later today, all completely focused around liability. And then anything I say right now, Sylvia is going to have to correct me on. So, but yes, the short answer is yes. There's a lot of questions and a lot of movement on how do we actually make the liability so that it makes sense, so that the providers are responsible for things that providers control, and software developers are responsible for the things that the software developers control. And then how are we making sure that we're checking and rechecking and following up and looking at these systems to make sure they're still doing the job that they started doing?
I'm going to just provide a quick preview to that question. I actually was at the AMA and was part of the team that started the journey related to AI policy. And you put your finger on one of the reasons we started the journey. It was very clear back in 2016 that the large tech companies were very interested in healthcare. They were very uninterested in assuming any responsibility for liability. And so AMA has very clear policy that you have to align the incentives. So to the extent that you have a black box, the liability should go to the developer. And to the extent there is greater transparency, it should flow to the end user. So the party that's best positioned to mitigate should bear the burden of liability. It's much more involved than that, but we hope to lay out a clear set of questions that you should consider. And Dr. Abramoff, the way we came to know him is that he was on this journey and he was the only clinician innovator, and the only innovator of hundreds that we talked to at the time who voluntarily said, I'm offering an autonomous AI system. The liability lies with me, with the developer. And when we interviewed every other developer, innovator who had great ideas, we're going to transform medicine, going to help patients. And so when we got to the question of autonomy and liability, every single one of them punted and said, well, this is really more an assistive tool, so the liability should lie with the clinician. So it's 2025. This conversation started in 2016. There's been a lot of work in the intervening period of time, and we'll talk about that this afternoon. So an incentive for you to stay.
Okay, and I'm getting a sign that we have 5 minutes here. For folks in the room, we will be coming back to you continuously throughout the day for questions. So just you've been forewarned. But I do want to see if we can throw it over to the online folks as well and see if we have any questions coming in from online.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions coming in online, so I'll just read some of them. How do you prevent these technologies becoming proprietary and forcing physicians to become mandatory subscribers in order to serve patients and increase operating costs, just like the EMR?
I'm looking to Sylvia on this one too. It's an issue and it's a challenge. I think one of the things that we've seen recently is the term that I really like is walled garden. And everybody wants to be the Apple of healthcare or the Apple of AI, and they want you in their system and they want you in your infrastructure. I think we had a really good conversation about this at dinner yesterday. I think a lot of this has to do with really making good tools for the portability of healthcare information, so that the patients are the ones that are actually able to access and move their information from one location to another. And I think part of that too is making sure that the outputs that we have from these AI services are structured in a way that they can be ingested and moved into EHRs, into other systems, and kind of throughout. But it's a question that's coming up, and I don't know that there's a completely 100% good answer for it yet. But
I thought that was great. And I'll just also give credit to Dr. Go, who also offered some observations that there's not one single solution. So to be clear, Dr. Sendek and I, going back nearly a decade, have a conversation. There's a lot of different AI systems, but broadly speaking, there are two categories. There are AI systems that large health systems develop. They're implemented in-house. They're designed, developed, validated, and deployed, and then retired within health systems. And they look a lot like, if you're familiar with clinical laboratory testing, they look a lot like laboratory developed testing services and procedures that are regulated under the Clinical Lab Improvement Act amendments. And then there are devices, and devices are not intended to be deployed in a single system, but they're designed to be monetized, commercialized, and they are distributed throughout the country. They go through the FDA, and they're called devices. And so there's a lot of different regulatory models that folks are talking about. And in fact, Dr. Sednick has published on this topic. So Jordan hit it on its head. Dr. Go last night talked about many different deployment conditions, different systems, some of which integrate. There's not one single solution. But Dr. Abramoff, once again, was, I think, prescient on this question of creating pharma-like tools that do rate-seeking or rent-seeking behavior, so charging really astronomical prices for these tools. And he, again, was one of the few individuals we talked to who said, we shouldn't be seeking rent-seeking behaviors. We shouldn't have really high pricing for AI tools. We need to democratize it. Individuals who innovate can be rewarded by the sheer volume, but the costs that should be charged should be quite low, because you can scale in a way that you can't scale individual services or other innovations. So that is really what we should be talking about from a policy perspective. You don't have to be pharma in order to make money in this space.